Law school is just the worst. Hey Legal Eagles, let's learn to think like a lawyer. Today we are going to cover the 5 things I hate most about law school. This is a companion video to the 5 things I love most about law school, because law school has good and bad. It is the best and it is the worst out there. So be sure to check out my other video to get a balanced view of what law school is like. But this video is about the worst of the worst, so let's dig in. The number 5 spot of things that I hate in law school is the busy work. There is so much busy work in law school. It's crazy because you get to law school and you have to read potentially tens if not hundreds of pages of cases per night. Often you end up using what you have read, but more often than not, you discard most of the reading that you had to do because it doesn't actually help you on the final exam. And what's worse is that there's this culture of case briefing where you will take all of the cases that you write and then you will summarize it, put it in your own words, and often write multiple pages for every case, and they just go into your notes. You don't turn them into the professor. They just go into your archives and you never really look at them again. Often case briefing can be a huge waste of time, but in a world where you're not graded on anything other than your final exam, there is this culture of trying to do things that you think are going to help you, but ultimately don't. And once you take your first semester finals, you understand what a waste of time so much of the work that you did was, because it doesn't help you on the final, which is the only thing that you're graded on. So often a lot of the busy work that is done during your first semester is by your own volition. You're not actually required to do it, but because law students are often A-type personalities, you're often doing a whole bunch of busy work because that's what you did in undergrad, and you bring that with you into law school, even though it's counterproductive. So I hate the busy work of law school. The good news is that often you can ignore a lot of that. Which takes me to the 4th most hated thing in law school, which is that it hasn't changed in years. Going to law school in the 21st century is really not unlike going to law school in the 20th or 19th century. It hasn't changed in literally hundreds of years. You're still reading the same cases. You're still reading hundreds of cases. You're still going to a lecture hall that uses the Socratic method that puts students on the spot. You're still taking issue spotter exams. Law school just hasn't really changed very much. Really, the only thing that has changed is that people are taking notes on laptops instead of taking notes with a pen and pad of paper. And that's not because law school was teaching people the best way that they could be taught for hundreds of years. It's just because people get entrenched in tradition and they don't feel like changing. And professors don't really have any incentive to change. So as a result, for better or worse, and mainly it's for worse, law school hasn't changed in years. Which takes me to the 3rd worst part of law school, which is the incredible stress that you're under. Everybody knows that when you get to law school, the grades that you get are going to define what job you're able to get when you graduate from law school. And as a result, you are under the worst pressure you have ever felt in your entire life. Stress can make people pull their hair out, gnaw on their fingernails, and sometimes much, much worse. The stress that you experience in law school is unlike anything else that's out there. And the worst part is that you often won't get any indication of how you're doing throughout the entire semester until you've taken your final exams and you get your grades back weeks, sometimes months later. So for all the stress that you've been doing, you get no way to check on your work to make sure that you're doing the right thing. And the problem is everybody is working really, really hard. So you might think that you can outwork other people, but that's just not the way it works. Really, effectively, everyone works as hard as they can, but nobody knows how they're going to do until the end of the semester, or sometimes after the end of the semester. It's really just a recipe for the worst stress that you can ever experience. So I recommend before you go to law school, get your stress levels under check, get a routine going, come up with methods to deal with stress so that you are prepared when you get to law school. Because even for myself, someone I think that can handle stress pretty well, it was unlike anything I've ever experienced. Which brings me to the 2nd worst part of law school, which is for all of that stress, it is unbelievably expensive. Law school often costs hundreds of thousands of dollars. I've seen people graduate from law school with over $300,000 in law school bills, and that doesn't even count their undergrad costs. It is unbelievably expensive, and unfortunately, only a small percentage of people get big firm jobs that can pay off those loans. If you go into government work, you might be locked into paying for your student loans for dozens of years because while government jobs are often very, very prestigious, they don't pay nearly as much as the $200,000 or more that you can get working at a big firm in a big city like New York, Los Angeles, or Chicago. So unfortunately, you really need to commit to law school. You need to be prepared to pay potentially thousands of dollars a month in law school loan repayment. So that's why I only recommend going to law school if you are 100% committed to becoming a lawyer, because you never know where you're going to end up when you graduate from law school, and you might be locked into paying off your student loans for a very, very long time. I'm not saying it's not worth it. It often is worth it. It was worth it for me. It was worth it for many of my friends, but just be prepared that law school can be very, very expensive. So that takes me to the number one worst part about law school. And that is that it doesn't prepare you for practicing as a lawyer. The myth of the lawyer in movies and TV who graduates from law school and immediately starts practicing is insane. I would never recommend that for anyone because law school doesn't teach you the nuts and bolts of actually being an attorney. It does do a fair job of teaching you how to think like an attorney, but when you graduate from law school, you don't know the first thing about filing a complaint. You don't know the first thing about defending a client. You have no idea how the courts work in practice. You get an idea a little bit from civil procedure, but that's just the tip of the iceberg. And so much of a lawyer's practice every day is about filling out forms and learning what language to use and what statutes to cite. And you have no idea what those things actually are when you graduate from law school. By the time you graduate from law school, you're about as ready to practice in the real world as when you started law school 3 years earlier. And for all that money, I think it should really do a better job of teaching you the nuts and bolts of actually practicing. If you want more tips on law school, check out this playlist that I put together. And if you're in law school or are going to law school, check out the link below to check out my free ebook on crushing law school. It is guaranteed to help you kick ass in law school. So click on the link and learn to ace your exams.